system that allows students to report issue bias incidents that are happening on campus, and then they're also able to file. They would be able to file or speak with somebody in our office to file a formal complaint of discrimination. So, for example, this hasn't happened at least since I've been here. But if a student said that, came in and said a faculty member in my course said because I'm Muslim he's going to fail me, or he thinks that all folks of my religious background are X, Y, and Z, that would be something that would violate an incident that would violate our policies, but also violate federal law. So what we would want to do is encourage that student to file a complaint with our office. It would allow us to investigate it within CDE. So we would have people that would interview the student and the faculty member, and we would take all of that information and make a determination. And if it was found that there was enough information to determine that that conversation, for example, did happen, or that the student was discriminated against in the course of their studies, we would take appropriate disciplinary action against that faculty member for the sole reason that that cannot be tolerated. It cannot be from a lot of different perspectives. So that's the type of response that we would have. We would also take. We would look at ways to move that student, for example, to a different class while we were doing our investigation. But that we would want to also do that quickly as well. So making sure we have prompt, thorough, and equitable policies that allow us and hopefully encourage students to come forward, but then also will allow us to take the appropriate action if there is an incident that we find violated our policies against discrimination.
So you're saying there've been incidents, but not very high profile.
Right. Nothing that explicit.
So what type of incidents then?
So what we've had is sometimes students will feel as though a faculty member is espousing a specific belief. Nothing explicit, but they will feel as though that they're not being heard in the classroom. Sort of those sorts of things. So it's not sort of as explicit as the person coming out and saying it, but it's more a feeling from the student's perspective that they're not being that they're being sort of cast aside or marginalized within the classroom. Sometimes those are tougher to deal with and look into. So nothing explicit, more along the lines of feelings of microaggressions or marginalization on campus from there.
But that is extremely tough.
It is.
Because
they're extremely subject. I mean, I think the hard part is the subjectivity of those incidents. So where you can't tell a student, and I wouldn't want anybody to tell a student that they're not feeling what they're feeling. But when it comes into trying to investigate, when it comes to trying to discipline, it becomes harder because usually those incidents don't have, direct evidence and information attached to them. So they become a little bit tougher to deal with from there because they are extremely subjective rather than objective from there. So it becomes a little hard. There's a little more delicacy involved.
Yes. So would it be fair to say that there's been from your angle that there's been more feelings of that sort?
Yes.
And that has been reported more by Muslim students?
Yes.
But at the same time, the level of proof or evidence, hard evidence, is lacking.
Yes. I mean, that would be fair. In most circumstances, it would be hard to prove. I think there's a heightened awareness, which is out there, but most of the time, it's a little bit tougher to prove because of the subjectivity that's attached. So what we try to do there is to respond more educationally, try to have more workshops with faculty members to bring them, to educate them more around some of these feelings that students will sometimes have in the classroom, to give them tips on how to create more of an inclusive classroom as it relates to, let's say, a specific controversial reading or film. How to have a discussion there that is inclusive rather than exclusive. So that's how we would respond there, rather than disciplinarily, but more educationally, because those incidents are more subjective and a little bit harder to prove from a disciplinary standpoint.
I'm going to be a bit like not devil advocate, okay? But isn't there a danger then that on the basis of feelings that are eminently subjective, that might actually not relate to actual occurrings, that there's an introduction of I wouldn't say thought police, but something
I know exactly what you're talking about.
And that's infringing upon academic freedom.
Yes.
Whereby, teachers, educators have to be so sensitive of everything they say that they end up saying nothing.
Right.
And that, I think, is a real danger.
It is. It's a concern that I have because I think in my mind and in my philosophy, what I experienced in my own education was that our classrooms have to remain spaces where I think where students are challenged, where controversial material is discussed, where faculty members have the freedom, but also hopefully the willingness to engage there. But what's happened, and it's unfortunate, is that you have faculty members that are concerned, and they are sort of maybe sometimes shying away from doing that because they don't want to offend or they don't want to run aground of that. What I try to do in my office and talk to and sort of encourage faculty members when I'm speaking with them is that when a student comes to us, we're going to take a common sense approach to this and not infringing upon academic freedom. I encourage faculty members to include controversial materials or materials that will spark a lot of conversations on both sides of the issue in their classrooms, because I think that's how students learn. It's how I learned in my own education. So if a student comes forward, we will tell them that, hey, this doesn't arise to an incident of discrimination. Not to say that they shouldn't feel the way they do, but we will tell them that based on our policy, based on academic freedom, based on freedom of speech, or just based on the values that we sort of espouse educationally, that we want this type of exchange of ideals in the classroom. So we will try to tell them that we hear them, but then also let them know that we're not going to respond in a way that's going to infringe on that. And then on the flip side, what we can then do is, let's say over the summer when we're doing a workshop with faculty, we'll say, okay, these are sometimes things that happen. This is maybe a way that you can still assign the same material, but as you're going through your classroom discussion, think about you doing it this way, in a way that maybe brings more ideals to the forefront. Or here's some tips on when you feel the conversation between two students, for example, going off track. Here's some tips for you as a faculty member to try to bring that together and tie it more to the material. Or here's how we want you to kind of, as a faculty member, your role in this, even though you're sometimes nervous about it because of all the things that are happening, we need you to be fearless. We need you to engage there, because if you don't, then students aren't going to learn. So sometimes it's about sort of affirming affirming academic freedom, providing more tools to faculty members so they can feel empowered enough and courageous enough to engage in these conversations. But you're right, one of the more concerning trends of mine in higher education is that we are, policing what's happening in the classroom, that we're censoring faculty in terms of how they teach and what they teach. And I think the further along that line we go, the more of a disservice that we're going to do to students over time. So it's about responding to the specific incidents that are objective, that are clear, that shouldn't happen. We want to be swift and thorough and firm there. But the ones in the middle that are a little more subjective, that are tougher, we have to take a different approach. And I think the approach that I encourage my folks to take is a common sense approach, one that affirms academic freedom and our First Amendment rights. Then overall, it's one that I think students learn better. I know I learn better in those really tough conversations, in those moments where I had faculty members that were fearless, that challenged me, that challenged others in the classroom, and that's what we want. And I think we have to be really adamant about that. But it's hard because there is this hyper awareness out there that we're, in terms of the environment that we're responding in as well.
So when you say, I just want to pick up on that. So about the content of what's taught.
Sure.
I would imagine that only certain subjects like politics, sociology, philosophy,
sure.
much more so than engineering or business studies. Is that where you've seen more, or where most students have come from?
Sure. That's most of it is like you mentioned around our political science courses, sometimes in English, philosophy, global affairs, and our international politics, history at times, because these are courses that are looking at, they're examining wars, they're examining conflict, they're examining religious beliefs or sort of the tentpoles of specific religions and values and those sorts of things. So those are most of the time where the flashpoints will arise as it relates to a specific film or assignment or movie or book, specific reading and that sort of thing as well. And a lot of that you see on you're seeing on other campuses where it's not it's not the engineering faculty member that when they want to come in and let's say there's a world famous engineer that wants to come do a speech on campus, nobody really cares because what they're going to be talking about is something sort of more quantitative. But when it's this controversial speaker that let's say that's written on this specific issue, then that's when the uproar will start, and we see those same sort of tensions on our campus. That it's around our qualitative material, and then specifically in some of these social science areas as well, which is sort of natural as we think about it.
Yes, well, that's and so to be clear, the incidents I don't know whether I would call them incidents, but feelings of marginalization on the part of some students tend to occur in the social science courses.
Yeah, I would say for the most part, that's correct.
Mm-hmm. So that's where precisely it's the most subjective.
Yes, right.
Always.
Yeah, and those are, like you said, it's the most subjective sort of materials, and then I think that's where what I want to do, and I speak with faculty and lead workshops with them, is trying to. There is this sense of there's a fear out there from a faculty perspective as they are they're seeing this happen in their students where they're being sometimes challenged more, they're being labeled more, and what I want to try to do for them is to encourage them to continue, even though it's not easy, continue with these assignments, continue challenging students, but then also to hopefully provide whatever insight and tips and do some workshops from there about how to maybe better do that as well in a way that still allows them the academic freedom to pick what they put on their syllabus and that sort of thing.
So when you say there's a fear, because I think that's right, so the fear on the faculty is that they see their students being labeled more, or that they fear they
feel so a lot of what I hear from faculty, if a conversation goes bad, they are concerned, or if as they a lot of them will say I've assigned to this reading every year that I've taught this course, and over the past 2 or 3 years when I do it, I get a really negative reaction from students, or I'm being challenged, or I've traditionally been able to be provided with some leeway or authority to be able to lead this discussion, and now I'm being challenged more. And I don't think faculty mind being challenged, but then they also, they also need a bit of room to be able to instruct, because that's their role is to instruct. So it's about, I think some of this is generational, and I think we have a changing student demographic which sees themselves more as equals rather than pupils. But
plus they pay.
Yes, exactly. Yep. And then they're more cost conscious, which changes the classroom instruction a bit. But I think higher ed can evolve there, but I also think that our classrooms still need to be led by faculty. They need to be instructed by the faculty, need to be the leaders there, being able to guide the students, and then they also need to have the courage, hopefully, and also the support from the institution to be able to keep those materials on the syllabus. So sometimes I'll get calls from faculty members to say, well, should I assign this movie? And I say, well, my first question is it pedagogically, connected to the course? And if the answer is yes, then my response is, well, then yes. And it doesn't matter what the content is. If there's a connection between this reading or this film and what you would like the students to leave with, or what you're trying to get across, then my response is always yes. And we'll deal with the issues as they come, but to do that, because I think we have to maintain that academic freedom. And then also I think it helps students over the long run. They may not be able to see it in that moment, but I think over the long run it helps.
Because one of the things about freedom is that once you take it away, it doesn't come back.
I agree.
It's very hard.
Yep.
And there's almost like, we can't do that anymore.
Yes.
And that becomes a norm.
Yep.
So
I agree.
And that, so what would the Muslim students, because that's where we're talking about, what are their demands in your experience?
So I think, in my opinion, I think their demands are, and I wouldn't even call them demands, I think what they would like, and this isn't just Muslim students, I think what they want is a more, a faculty or a university that recognizes them better, that understands, that has a greater understanding of who they are as a people in general, who they are as a member of this community, rather than painting them with this broad brush that they come in a lot of different shapes, sizes, backgrounds, that they, so when I hear from Muslim students that are wearing the hijab or are covering themselves, one of the things they say is that they do so because that's their personal belief or their religious belief, but this isn't that they're not oppressed, that they feel as though that they are more than free to do as many things as they would feel like it. And the same way sometimes we hear from the male students is that they would like to experience the campus. They're going to worship differently than maybe other students, but that they enjoy a movie or those types of things, to see them more as individuals rather than painting their religion with this larger brush. And sometimes, so I think what they want is faculty and students and administrators that understand that and that are able to view them competently and in a way that allows them to be individuals and understand more of their values and their background and that sort of thing.
Just isn't it at times a bit contradictory? Because on the one hand, students want to be recognized as individuals with their full, so people to get the full picture.
Yes.
And yet at the same time, if they're becoming more quote unquote religiously assertive, then
they're going to sort of band together in their own.
Yes, and also that's almost natural that people will identify them more in terms of their religious beliefs because that's what they present to the world, even physically.
Yes,
visually. And so there's a tension there.
Yes, it is. I mean, it's difficult, and I think because of institutions, especially institutions of higher ed, we're not set up well to do that. So it's what I think we have to get better at is to do both at the same time. So we have to allow spaces for students, let's say in student organizations, to band together, worship together, to come together and congregate as their own organization, because I think they gain strength and solidarity and comfort in those moments where they may feel as though sort of coming together. But then also you have to have the understanding that they may be more than that. So they're more than and it's I think that's where the education process comes in. It's a lifelong, it's a lifelong, and it's okay to be both. It's okay to be for students to be proud of their faith and their determination and their devotion to it, where they come from, but also that we have to have spaces for them to step out of that as well, and that can't be the only thing that people see. It's really tough, and I think some people are better at it than others. But one of the things as we think about where I'm optimistic around higher education, I think that we're more equipped to do that. I think because when you think about the reason we're all here is to learn, and if we think about that as a learning experience for everybody involved, I think that's where we can be the model from there. So some of it is maybe setting up intercultural dialogues between students, which we've done from there. And then also sometimes and after that, we may have a student that goes straight to the mosque or straight to a prayer where they're going to be surrounded by those that are just like them or share the same belief. And then they're going to walk into their dorm and be around others that aren't. And I think that's sometimes the hard part, but also the beauty of what we do as an institution across the world. I think that's one of the things that's special about higher education, wherever we are from there. But it is sometimes a difficult task, and it's because we're bringing in just so many. There's so many facets of what makes a person, and we're seeing that here, and we're just bringing it all together. And it's that tension that I talked about is going to be there.
Yeah, because the old traditional way of thinking, of seeing that was students were here to learn.
Yes.
Teachers academics were going to teach them.
Yep. And everything else stays outside of the.
Yes, and they cannot. Teachers, academics cannot be social workers, counselors, psychologists. Yep. And as well as politically and religiously sensitive, on top of all the other duties that they have to perform. Yes. And what I fear as an educator is that we might be, and I'm thinking about England, going into that direction where you have the list of things that you have to do and be aware of. Yep. You might as well open a private practice.
Yes. It's and I think this is the one of the things that's happening in higher education, and in my mind, I think that's one of the reasons that costs are going up just in general. But we're being asked to replicate every industry that we see outside of higher ed. So if you think about, we have counselors on campus, mental health counselors, the same way there's mental health counselors in Washington, D.C., Fairfax. We have law enforcement on campus, the same way there's local law enforcement. We will have, we are providing food service in our cafeterias. We have to provide housing and shelter. We have to provide, medical services in terms of our health centers. Then a ton of other recreate. So this is now, we've essentially created our own sort of structure inside of this larger state or city. We're now have to create our own state or city that replicates and does all of these things, and our faculty specifically are being charged with or expected to help do that and do that same exact thing. So it's I think that's a trend that unfortunately I don't see going anywhere. It's one that I think sounds like it's now crossed the pond and I think it's going to be sort of worldwide, and it's creating, in my mind, I think as we think, when students are seeing their tuition go up, I think this is part of the